You're listening to Overwatch League Daily, your daily source for Overwatch League news, scores, and more. Here's your host, KickedTripod.
Good morning, Overwatch League fans, and welcome to Overwatch League Daily, your daily source for Overwatch League news, scores, and opinions. I am John KickedTripod Horseman, and here's your Overwatch League Daily episode for December 21st, 2017. On today's show, I'm joined by Overwatch analyst and journalist Joseph Volamel Franco as we discuss tanks in Overwatch League. So let's start with the broad brushstrokes here. Why are tanks so important for Overwatch?
Tanks are facilitators of space. They are the ultimate zone control tools in this sense. If you don't have any zone, and you don't have any ground to work with, you're just running up the beach of Normandy, getting mowed down by machine gun nests, and it's not a good time. Especially for a great example of this, right? If you have your solo queue games, go queue up into solo queue, have a team with no tanks, try to attack an assault map. It's going to be a very not fun time. Tanks facilitate your team the same way that supports facilitate everybody else on their team. They add, instead of healing through a support, tanks kind of assist you through helping you get to certain points in the map that help you stage an attack on certain points. They make room, they make space. That's something that is often said but not really understood. So what people mean by this is, like, for example, let's go back to the assault example. On Temple of Anubis, it's very common for teams to rush to the point, and you have a choice there. You can either go left or right. Left takes you to plateau, right takes you all the way to the high ground right above the point. You're never going to be able to get to those points if you don't have tanks to help you move through key choke points and shield you or, absorb damage in some way to get there. If you don't have any tanks, it's going to be very hard for you're going to have more movement because your team overall will have more mobility if you just don't have tanks. But it's going to be very hard for you to consistently break through the enemy defensive line. So tanks are incredibly important because A, they make space, B, they help you get to staging points on the map, and C, they zone control. So even on defense, tanks control points, and they're incredibly important. And having good tank players is one of the most underlooked values in Overwatch.
You mentioned tanks being one of the more overlooked roles in Overwatch. Why do you think that looking at tanks is so underwhelming or underrated?
I think tanks are overlooked for the same reason why supports are overlooked. If you don't have a highlight play to really draw attention to you as a player, it's very difficult for people to draw past the kind of attention of the broadcast to where the broadcasters really want to emphasize as much as possible the tanks and supports, but it's hard for them to facilitate that because the game is FPS centric. So when you have a Widowmaker, when you have a Hanzo, when you have a Tracer, when you have a McCree, those tend to draw a bit more of the broadcast time, and it's hard for even the third person sky cam, if you will, to really pick up on the little intricate details of their game that you might not be able to pick up. So hopefully once we have personal POVs or even replays, we won't have that problem, and tanks will be maybe amazingly overlooked. I don't know. We'll see.
Okay, so let's get down to the real topic at hand here. Yesterday, we had Avril discuss DPS duos in Overwatch League, and it was really insightful. Today, we're talking more about the tank role, and let's start there. Who do you think had the best tank duo of the Overwatch League preseason?
I think you have to really look at just a few names here, just to throw off the top of my head, because it is the preseason and I don't want to weigh that too heavily because we had a lot of kind of testing that a lot of these teams went into. I think they, played loose. It's not to say that they didn't care, but it is the preseason. I have to kind of wait to give my own opinion on the best tank duo until the first season or the beginning of the Overwatch League, season 1. But some standouts obviously were Seoul Dynasty's tank line of Zunba, Kuki / Miro. I think that they played up to expectations. We have a high regard for Team Seoul and the Lunatic High Core, and Kuki fit within that machine, and he slotted in very, very well. Another duo that I can highlight would be the Houston Outlaws tank duo of Cool Matt and Muma. I think that they've been a stellar tank duo since their FN or GFE days. They have meshed really, really well with the team. They're incredibly coordinated, and it looks very seamless. And I expect very good things from them in the future.
I definitely think Cool Matt and Muma stood out for me as well. What, in your mind, made these tank duos stand out above the rest?
I think when tanks tend to look their best is when it's seamless. And what I mean by that is when everything is as fluid as possible and coordination is at its peak. A team that really exemplified this, in my opinion, was GC Busan back in Apex Season 4 and in the APAC tournament that they went to shortly after and won. The team was probably the highest level of just not pick potential, but target focusing that we've seen so far during those two tournament spans. Now that they came into the preseason, they have struggled a little bit. It is the preseason, so I don't want to bash on them too hard. But I think that's when tanks look the best, is when the coordination is on point. Everything's very, very crispy and fluid and very nice and neat.
I think it's definitely easy to see when a tank duo is doing really well and doing great for the team, but sometimes it's difficult to see when tanks are actually the problem or are the reason the team is underperforming. In your mind, for the preseason week, who did you really see as underperforming their team or to their potential?
One of the tank duos that kind of disappointed me coming into the preseason probably would have been Woo Hyul and Jester from GC Busan, now playing for the London Spitfires. I think that they were a giant anchor and a great example of what good, not only tank play, but just understanding of what their roles were on that team and in that meta. Now that we're coming in with Junkertown being a very wide meta map, and what I mean by that is that there's a lot of different variations of how to play that map right now. It feels like there's lots of different things that are working, lots of different things that aren't working for other teams. They kind of have to find their niche in that way, and I don't know if they found that yet. And it was the first game for them of the preseason and being on stage, so there's lots of factors that go into that. So hopefully coming into season 1, they can to pick it up. I know that there was a funny tweet by their coach that things were going to change. So hopefully once the coach is in, Woo Hyul and Jester, come back to form and return to that crispy tank play that I know that they can do.
All right, last question then. Who in your mind really seemed to surprise you with their tank skill or their tank play from the Overwatch preseason? There was a lot of question marks coming into the preseason about how teams would mesh and how teams would work together and synergize. And it's pretty safe to say that we didn't get all of them right. What were some of those tank duos that really went against the community's predictions?
The one tank that surprised me and kind of went above and beyond, in my personal opinion, would have to be Kuki. Not to mention that his English was amazing, grade A on that one. His kind of transition from a kind of tier 2 organization, the MVP organization for those who don't know, coming from Apex and in playing with Insult Dynasty, that is a team that is very, very good. I don't know how else to put that. They're just really good. So kind of changing it up and throwing a curveball and using different kind of chess pieces in a sense, while also maintaining a stellar team, is interesting to me because Miro and Kuki kind of share similar hero pools, so I don't know how that team dynamic is going to kind of go forward. Is Miro the more offensive Winston? Is Kuki going to be more of a peel Winston, a backline Winston in a way? We'll have to see. I think that the preseason has given us a little spice of what's to come, so I'm interested to see how Kuki develops leading into the beginning of season 1.
My thanks to Volamel for hanging out for this episode. Make sure to follow him on Twitter at Volamel. And on tomorrow's episode, I'm going to be joined by Overwatch caster and analyst for the Oceanic region, Jake Xenox Brander, to discuss how supports performed in Overwatch League preseason. Remember, you can find the show on any of your favorite podcast outlets, including iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Podcasts. And we're also on YouTube. Click on the link in the show notes to find us. If you want to stay in touch, email me at overwatchleaguedaily@gmail.com, tweet me at OWLDailyShow, or join our Discord at discord.me/OWLDailyShow. That's going to do it for today. We'll be back tomorrow for another episode of Overwatch League Daily.